Jyuohger! Bangrey's end is coming. I mean, it's made pretty obvious that that's the route they're headed with this. If not in the next episode, then at least very, very soon with how they pretty much enter the endgame scenario with him returning after a filler episode to finally confront them again to try and get Cube Whale. Now, this episode is pretty much a running battle with Bangrey. They pretty much just rush through the setup stuff to get to it, but it's again showing everybody as intelligent, as first off, Bangrey does a triple giant monster brawl to try and get them to draw out Cube Whale, and they don't fall for that because it's an obvious trick, a really obvious trick, but, one you would think would work since, sorry, the way these shows usually go is they become more reliant on the final mech right before the final combination. So they're subverting expectations with this, and since there were 3 of the giant monsters this time, they went with using the base level combinations to show how they've grown and advanced and how their tactics have changed, so they don't even really need it because, again, all the clones have shown themselves to be less powerful than their real versions. I mean, even though they're supposed to be as strong, as capable, sometimes lacking some of their special abilities, but they can't take as much damage before they dissolve, so they are ultimately weaker, as if you can penetrate their defenses, they go down easy. And I really like this opening battle, except for one aspect of it. When they go to get all the mechs to combine into their simpler 3-part combinations with the accessories, they use cut-in sequences from the combination to Wild Tosai King. So you think they're immediately going to Wild Tosai King, and then they start on the cutscenes for all the smaller mech combinations. And I would think they would just, mash together in a 3-way split the sequences that show the lesser combinations going together before segueing into Wild Tosai King to finish them off, which is what they actually do. So yeah, it's a bit of an incongruity and definitely a continuity error with regards to the stock footage they decided to use for this. That it's a bit unusual. I don't know. Maybe they just, I'm not going to even guess on that. But since they know that Bangrey is behind the giant clone summoning, and they can't put up with his hit-and-run tactics much longer before Cube Whale definitely becomes endangered, since Cube Whale is, I think the best way to describe it is offended that they didn't call it in to help them fight, as it's all panicky about their condition when they get back to Yamato's home, to the point they actually need to tie it up so it won't chase after them the next time they go into battle, which sets up all types of warning flags, since, of course, the second they come out with Bangrey around, he's going to go after it. Thus, I really like this part of the episode. They get Mario to create a toy copy of the toy scale mech. And they do it, of course, with a picture, but this has been foreshadowed since the beginning of the series. I don't want to say foreshadow, since that would imply that they've been building up to this grand reveal of Mario's ability saving the day, and that's not exactly how they use it, so foreshadowing is definitely the wrong word. But they use his already established capabilities as a sculptor, as an artist, as a person who has a attention to detail, to take a drawn image of Cube Whale and perfectly scale replica recreation of the mech in its small toy form. Admittedly, with the scene, how they show the scene, they probably just use the actual toy, since that's easy to do, and put a false bottom on it to show to more actually, since they smash it later in the episode, it could have been a prop recreation which used the toy as a model. I'm, of course, observing this out of show and in of show, depending on which would have been easier to shoot with or make initially. But either way, that's how they get the fake they're trying to use to trick Bangrey with it. And they also use Mario's costume masks that again are not masks, they're just really odd helmets that he's been using over the course of the series for each of their thematic animal motifs as helmets, so Bangrey won't be able to read their minds and create clones with which to distract them from actually fighting and finishing him off this time. The thing is, Bangrey, again showing that everybody in this show is acting intelligent in their motives and actions, instantly sees through this deception and prepares his own counter to this tactic, and that is to clone all of the Jyuohger using Kubal's memories of them, since it's already been established those two have a alliance, so Bangrey gets assistance hunting the whale, and Kubal gets assistance in dealing with Genis, when, of course, Bangrey is using Kubal, and I think Kubal realizes it because he's getting absolutely nothing back in this partnership, but he's willing to be used to get his less than well-addressed revenge. But it's working so far for the story in that it completely destroys the plan that the group had put together, which unironically hinged on Misao, since his Super Beast Awakening form can deal the single most amount of damage in a rapid hit. Otherwise, this is of course discounting Zuo Whale's finishing move with the arm cannon, but that takes more of a charge-up time, which isn't necessary in with Misao's abilities. And again, it makes sense, but is kind of lampshaded and a clue to Bangrey about this plan, because, well, to do this right, they need to lead him. They need to lead Bangrey to Misao, who's off in the distance, away from everyone. Now, it's a pretty long-running battle with which to get him there, which I think is the flaw in their plan. Had they rushed him to one other location through this distraction where Misao was waiting and not had the much far extended bout to get him out of the city, I think this plan would have had a higher chance of success. But because they delayed to get him all the way out there, the counter plan of Bangrey and Kubal's of cloning the Jyuohger to get them into distractionary fights, aka what the Jyuohger was trying to avoid in the first place, came in to completely disrupt that plan. And I really liked the clone fights, as it went on a good thematic for all of them. All of the beastmen of them were facing Misao, who, it is more malicious interpretation of the character from when he was controlled, which makes sense since this is Kubal's memory of Misao, which is more defined by that than anything by the individual himself. It's kind of like how when Sella and Tusk were copied, where since they are themselves, they know more about themselves as a memory than anything else, whereas Kubal's only interactions with the Jyuohger have been as antagonists, so they act more like antagonists, because how should I describe this? Actually, I need to refer to Evangelion with this, in that your perception of self is something absolute. You have an active perception of yourself, you have a true self-perception, and then you have a perception of those who see you. In other phrases, you have a preconceived notion of another person, from your interactions with them. The less you interact with someone, the less you know about them, the more warped your interpretation may be of them through your experiences and your own view of the world. And so Kubal's version of the Jyuohger are all more... It's limited to them as enemy players, so of course they'd be more hostile and seem more menacing because that's the view he might have of them as obstacles in the game. So that explains how they seem a bit out of character as enemy players, and that especially is noticeable with Misao's clone, as that's still the corrupted worlds from when Genis created him that he views him as. The same can be said to an extent of Yamato's two clones. He creates a fake ego which fights Misao one-on-one, who the attacks on Misao demoralize him enough so it's a pretty even fight until he realizes what's happening. Whereas Bangrey sets the clones of all the Beastmen onto Yamato as, kind of another attempt with his running thematic with Yamato of trying to break the bonds between them by having him fight the friends he's closest to. Again, that makes sense with respect to Bangrey as a villain, and a twisting of the dynamics and trying to turn them all against each other. It, of course, doesn't come to full fruition because, again, they're smart. If this was a completely different show, this would lead to them all breaking off and then thinking everyone else was being a jerk and attacking them for no reason, when that wasn't what was happening. No, they trust each other, they know each other better than that. So the instant this happens, they realize that these are obviously Bangrey clones, especially since we had the filler episode already that showed they could do that. So it's, once again, they're outsmarted, but they're not in an idiotic way. They realized what was going on with the deception that screwed up their plan. The villains were smart enough to see the plan coming and have a way out of it. And all in all, it's, again, why I've been really enjoying this show, as it's good fights for the most part. I admit this one had some choppier editing and execution of some of the antics of everyone involved here. Good characterization. Everyone is given something to do, a way to do things that's entirely their own way. It's like it's paying off in every respect for the time and effort put into it, and I'm just really glad I've been sticking around through the series so far. Of course, it ends on a cliffhanger because this is the two-part final mecha combination episode debut, which is, of course, coming next week, and I'm not a fan of it. I'll get into that next week when we come to it, but Yamato's kidnapped, so the ransom to get him back is, of course, Cube Whale. So without the leader, without the one that is the common rallying point between the six, how will they cope? How will they counter? How will they work to save him from Bangrey, who obviously sees Yamato as the best way to get Whale out into the open as the new partner to kill it. So yeah, I'm looking really forward to next week. And to start in a non-X side, it also pretty well complemented this in the regards to partnerships, and I should probably pull up the Kamen Rider Wiki on the character because I have no idea what the guy's name is. It's Taiga Hanaya. I really should be remembering that. X-Side Episode 3 introduces the fourth rider of the series. Yeah, it's getting crowded. It is getting very crowded. And very much feels like Gaim in all this with how rapid its rider introduction ended up being. First episode was Gaim with the white rider in the background. Second episode was Baron. Third episode was Ryugen. I forget if it was the fourth or fifth episode that had Kurokage and Grid on. I think it was by the sixth. No, I think it was a bit later than that, but then we immediately had, not Brave, Bravo. And so it's seeming a lot like that because they're all, being introduced so rapidly. So it's like, first episode was focused on introducing Emu. Second episode was introducing Kagami. Third episode is on Taiga Hanaya and how he factors into the, original Day Zero incident 5 years ago that began the widespread bugster infection. And essentially, he's a doctor that lost his license because of that incident, and he lost a patient, which I assume to be patient zero, that allowed the bugster virus to more broadly enter the real world. And this ties into things as the original patient was someone that was a friend, a lover, a family member of Kagami. We've not gotten the details on it, but it was someone he was close to that the loss deeply affected him, and in a way immediately informs why he's so detached and yet involved in this whole mess that Emu's found him in that he has a personal stake to stop the bugsters, and much like Taiga, he's not going to care about the patient so much as defeating them. Admittedly, that's a bit hindered by how Kagami backs out of the battle, which he still views as an operation, because it becomes too dangerous. Again, this, I think, is a surgery metaphor, since he's a surgeon, because if I'm remembering my thing from Scrubs correctly, it's been a while since I watched that series, because I don't watch comedies much these days. But I remember something about surgical scores and success rates where a doctor would back out of performing an operation because they thought it wasn't what would more affect their scores versus the ability to actually save a patient or something. I'm not a doctor. I am not well researched in all this stuff. I'm just remembering stuff off the top of my head because this is how my brain keeps information. I really don't know why it keeps this kind of thing in my head, but yeah, it allows him to retain his jerkishness while showing that there's a deeper reason why he's doing what he does that I'm hoping to see expanded upon when we get the fifth writer in the show next week, who also has a connection into all of this. And, it's interesting because, in a way, I feel this is also reminiscent of Ryuki, in that everyone but the protagonist had a personal stake in the writer war there, and the only reason it went on so long and extended was this new idiot character fucking everything up. And except in this case, the bugsters actually are defeated by saving people versus the way Shinji Kido went about saving people in Ryuki ended up extending the war and getting more people killed. So it's not going to end up framing Emu as a hypocrite this way, since he actually is shown to be doing the right thing by, and in fact the episode shows that the bugster is weakened by assuring the patient and trying to keep him living versus disregarding him to actually deal with the bugster infection. So, broader scheme, once they get over the personality issues between everybody, they're definitely going to be a very effective team. But the issue with Kagami and Taiga now is that their personal obsessions or preferences of how they deal with this conflict are overriding their better nature in collaborating against the bugsters. So the infighting thus far is justified in narrative, especially since how they describe why Taiga screwed up. He became obsessed with the games. We don't know if this is because he was a user of a prototype, so he was mentally affected, or if it's his own personality that made him a bit obsessive over the drivers. But we know he has some type of personal vendetta against the bugsters that's probably informing why he's obsessed with the games in turn. He lost someone to them, so he wanted to become good enough with the gaming systems to, unite all 10 of them, at least the 10 base ones, to have the power to wipe out the Bugster virus permanently. Follow a screwed up path to redemption, possibly, with this obsession, but with how to describe it, it becomes something of a chicken and egg thing. He lost his doctoral license because of the Day Zero incident, because he lost a patient, but he only lost the patient because he became obsessed with the gaming systems, and he only became obsessed with the gaming systems because he wanted to defeat the Bugsters. So, while they deliver all this exposition in here, it's kind of, they don't set down the timeline for events with Taiga's fall from grace, so to speak, 5 years ago very well. What precedes the other? Did he start fighting the Bugster viruses, then something personal happened to him that got him obsessed with mastering the games, and then he lost the patient, which has the connection to Kagami? And would this precede or be a result of Day Zero? It's something that needs to be expanded upon later to fully justify, and they're at least sowing the seeds very well in that it's all tying into the main incident and teasing more information instead of dragging it out unnecessarily. Like, this is the 3rd episode. We know what happened 5 years ago, the original outbreak of the Bugster infection. We know what happened Day Zero, who was involved with that, and why Kagami would be involved in the CR, not just because his father is involved in it. We now know why Genom Corp is involved with the Ministry of Health and has kind of superseded it because of this Bugster virus that, in fact, may have originated from them, and they're in a way trying to right this wrong while also possibly researching it to show they could be evil. You know, putting out the wildfires that came about from burning something, so to speak. It's all tying together very well with very direct, pointed scenes that don't seem like a waste, while also being the B-plot to the actual conflict of the episode, which is kicked off by a little kid, a little bratty kid at that, who has an understandable fear of doctors. And I say it is understandable because I was afraid of doctors as a kid. I pretty much just saw my pediatrician until I was like 12. We ended up bouncing around doctors like that, so I've only had like 3 doctors I've regularly seen in my life. So, I kind of understand the feeling of the kid, and it's a pretty mutual fear to fear hospitals and fear people that treat you less like a thing, but are less than a person and more like a thing when they're trying to make you feel better. So, and of course, the whole don't like being pricked by needles thing. And this kid has a justified perception and fear of doctors because he had an operation that made him feel terrible when he was younger, so that's an understandable fear. For all we know, it could have been Kagami who was so disinterested in the welfare of the patient that he actually might have invoked that fear to tie it more into the overall narrative of the issues with Kagami's treatment of patients and how it might exacerbate their health conditions, whereas Emu's trying to be the more empathic and compassionate doctor, which his compassion is not being treated as something imbecilic, which I really appreciate from a modern Toei writer. And pretty much getting him over that fear is what helps them finally defeat the Bugster virus, because otherwise that fear is a stressing factor that allows it to propagate more of itself while weakening the host's own health. So it's all tied together very well in an episode that is very, very heavy on action. Yes. This episode, by the way, was directed by Koichi Sakamoto, and it shows in the final fight, as it's very big on, I don't want to say gratuitous explosions and effects, but it is a bit noticeable, and it is justified at least because the monster the Bugster of the week is from an FPS game, and he has all this kind of cybernetic artillery. His Bugster minions are all gun wielders. It introduces the Kamen Rider that is based on first-person shooters, and his weapon is a gun that can be powered up into a submachine gun and then transform into a high-power sniper rifle. And some types of sniper rifles have explosive rounds. They are also energy shots, so the explosions here are all narratively justified why they would exist, and the rapid backed out, backed in, cut together, people flying out from things exploding, that all fits because that's how first-person shooters work a lot of the time. I know I've played enough Halo and seen people stickied and then go flying. I've done the rocket jumping in Team Fortress 2. I'm remembering this one incident where we used a person in a rocket launcher Warthog to launch another Warthog off of a cliff to the other side of the map where no one else could reach. So, yeah, the gratuitous of the explosions are completely justified. Especially the way they deal with the whole gaming genre tie-in this time, with the commander being someone that's representative of the game, can spawn more minions as long as he's living, which plays into the patient stress factor, making that stronger in the respawn. So it's really the minions are all cannon fodder, so it makes sense to deal with them with explosions, since you can always generate more for the fights and just wear them down. As part of the challenge of first-person shooters is survival, and you definitely get that emphasis on this with how desperate the stakes seem, even though they're just punching through them all. And it actually takes a heroic last stand from Emu, his power gauge almost to its bottom, where I assume, they describe the power bar going to 0 as game over, and I assume that means he either transforms, loses his transformation in the middle of a battlefield, which would be all types of bad, but they never exactly describe what the game over actually entails. Does he die if he loses all his power? Does it just leave him defenseless and unable to transform again? What's the line here? That needs to be the next relevant piece of exposition to give to the audience, and exactly what that means. But essentially, Emu's actual understanding of how games work leads to him Deus Ex Machina-ing. I shouldn't say he's Deus Ex Machina-ing because it's justified in story with the gamer powers of the drivers, but he essentially gets a short-use invincibility power-up with which to counter the onslaughts of the chief bad guy, and seemingly destroy him, only for him to actually be using a stealth power-up and subterfuge tactics, which none of them beforehand had caught on to, but is actually very well edited, in that right as the monster that they think is the chief exploding, the illusion of him vanishes to show one of the mooks is actually being destroyed. It's like a blink and you miss it kind of moment, but if you manage to see it, you understand exactly Snipe's following actions, where he triggers his finishing move with his sniper rifle and seems to shoot at Emu, but it makes total sense that he's actually getting the bad guy, and it's choreographed as that right before he seemingly shoots Emu, and just misses him to get it and get the game clear and actually cure the patient. So it seems like a dick move. Emu thinks it's a dick move, but it's actually him stealing the kill, I should say, since, well, at least he wasn't a team-killing fucktard, to borrow a phrase from Red vs. Blue. Also, snipe camping. It's a legitimate strategy! I'm enjoying this series. But yeah, because of that, because of a bet they made earlier, Emu loses the Mighty Action X game cartridge. I assume he gets it back next episode, since in the preview information, the trailer for the next episode we saw at the end of the episode, he has it back, but I'm kind of curious on what the situation is behind that. And also, can they only produce one rider gas shots per thing? I would think these things would be mass producible, but the limitations of compatible users would limit the ability to make more gaming riders, since we know there are 10 types of gas shots, but we don't know if they can. And we know they can make others, because there's the Proto Mighty Action X that Kamen Rider Gem has. So, do they just make another one for Emu to use in the next episode? It's something I'm curious about them answering next week. But otherwise, it's a very good episode, very high action episode. The action choreography from Koichi Sakamoto, as usual, is excellent, even if it is gratuitous with explosions. No, they're not cow explosions. That has been disproven. Check it out. Other news. I've got Garo episodes up on YouTube now. Yes, you have no idea how much stress that put me through to actually get them to work there. Trying to get others up on YouTube, it's hazy, since I'm kind of busy trying to get the O-Ranger reviews done before November begins. I really want to be done with my production of the season for the year by the first week in November. It's my deadline for all that, because I got to work on stuff for the show for next year, and I don't want to be completely exhausted from the seasonal works that started. I'm working every day. It's very stressful. So, yeah. This was actually a bit of a stress relief down for me to see, being stuck in the moment for that. So, nonetheless, I will see you all next week, where we have a Final Combination Mech debut and a biking Kamen Rider Doctor, who is a corridor. I hope he has a fun sense. No, that's not the phrase I want to use. I hope he has a deathly humor. That was bad. That was totally bad. I'll see you all next week.